Hello, and welcome to Latin 1, the final grammatical item that you have to cover for the year. Today we're going to be learning about the final three tenses that make up the active voice system. Altogether, they are called the perfect system, and the three tenses are the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect tense. To prepare yourself for this little lecture and note-taking session, you're going to want to have your blue chart in front of you. You could also have your green charts available. You may want to have a pencil or pen for taking notes, a separate sheet of paper if you're interested in taking additional notes on that, or you can just simply write on the back or in the margins of the blue chart if you need to take additional notes. So as we've been talking about the present, imperfect, and future tense, I've made reference several times to the fact that all of these tenses formulate what is called the present system. And they are called the present system because all three of the tenses, present, imperfect, and future, all follow the same set of three rules for conjugating. They get a base, they add a connecting vowel, and then they attach the ending. The other thing that makes them a system is the fact that the base for each of these tenses comes from the second principal part, or the infinitive of the verb. So as we move forward to look at the perfect system, we want to understand that they are a system because of the same types of similarities that we saw in the present system. The perfect system tenses are the perfect, the pluperfect, and the future perfect. And we are going to discover that all three of those tenses will also be conjugated using the same set of rules. The perfect set of rules will look exactly like the set of rules for the pluperfect and future perfect tense when we go to conjugate them. These will be different from the rules that are used in the present system. And also what's going to be different is where the base of the verb is found. So that's what we have to look forward to. What are the rules for conjugating in the perfect system? Where do we get the base for the verb of the perfect system? And of course, we're going to need to learn the endings for each of the tenses in the perfect system, as well as how do we translate each of these verb tenses in the perfect system. Let's talk for a moment about what it means to be in the perfect system. The verb perfect in Latin comes from the verb perficio. Perficio, perficere, perfeci, perfectum. And you can see, especially from this fourth principal part, where we get the word perfect. The verb means to finish or to complete. It would help if I could spell the words correctly. When you get to the word perfectum, which is the fourth principal part and looks like our word perfect, that particular form of the verb is translated perfected, or having been completed, or perfected. So when we say that something is perfect, what we mean is to say that it is or has been completed. So when we are working in the perfect system, we are looking at verb tenses that all talk about completed actions. So all verb tenses in the perfect system are completed actions. All verbs in the perfect system talk about completed actions. The reason that there are three different verb tenses is because each tense talks about when the action was completed. and they are sequential. So the different verb tenses in the perfect system represent the time when each action was completed. We have the perfect tense, which we can say was completed at a definite time in the past or at some indefinite time in the past. For example, yesterday I rode my bicycle 12 miles. This action, I rode my bicycle 12 miles, was completed at a definite time in the past. Often, I have ridden my bicycle for more than 12 miles. In that particular sentence, I am talking about an action completed at some definite time, indefinite time in the past. So I just tell you that at various times in the past, I have ridden my bicycle for more than 12 miles. I do not give you a specific date. The pluperfect tense was completed at some time in the past prior to the completion of another action completed in the past. This is perhaps one of the more confusing ones for students to use because they get confused by the idea that we're actually talking about sequence of events. So whenever you have a sentence that is discussing two events, and if the events are not happening simultaneously, then you want to bring the pluperfect tense into play. To say which event happened first, you must express it with the pluperfect tense. So let me see if I can think of an example here. I called the police after the thief had stolen my iPhone. So in this sentence, there are two actions, the action of calling the police and the action of the thief stealing my iPhone. It's obvious to see because of the word after that calling the police is the second event to happen, not the first. The thief stealing my iPhone is the first event to happen. And so because of that, it's expressed by the pluperfect tense. We make something pluperfect in English by the insertion of the word had in front of the past participle of the verb. Called would simply be in the perfect tense. It's a once and done action at a specific time. I called the police after the thief had stolen my iPhone. Students often ask me, isn't it redundant to say had stolen if I use the word after in the sentence? Because doesn't after really communicate the sequence of events? It is true that after communicates the sequence of events, and it communicates the connection between the two ideas. But grammatically speaking, the tense of the verb must be in the pluperfect if the action of the sentence took place prior to the first action mentioned. So even though it looks as though it's redundant, it's really not. After communicates the relationship between the two actions, whereas if the relationship is sequence, you must actually use the pluperfect tense to talk about the action that takes place first. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, you'll have to either shoot me an email or come talk to me and find out a little bit more about that. The last tense that we will be learning about in the perfect system is the future perfect tense. The future perfect tense is just what it says it is. It is an action that will be completed in the future. It's kind of mind-boggling to think about that, but actually we use it quite frequently in English. Anytime you have the verbs will and have together in front of an action verb, you've created the future perfect tense. For example, on June 5th, the seniors will have graduated from high school. So we know that graduation is set for June 5th and that this is something that is positively, absolutely going to happen in the future. And when we talk about the event taking place or being completed, we need to use the future perfect tense. So it's future because they will do this in the future, but we're talking about it being done. So on June 5th, the seniors will have graduated from high school. You don't see this too often. A lot of times in Latin, you'll see it being used in sentences that start with if, because if talks about usually something in the future and something that isn't done right now, but might be done later on. So a lot of times that's where you will see it in the future tense. So in a really quick nutshell, those are all the tenses of the perfect system. Remembering that if they're in the perfect system, then they are actions that have already been completed or will be completed in the future. That their primary difference is discussing about which time in the past the action has been completed. If you need to ask questions of me about this, please take a moment to jot them down and send them to me on the forum in Moodle, or you can see me personally in the classroom or send me an email, and I will gladly answer your questions about these. If you feel comfortable or when you have your questions answered to move on, you can go on to the next video lecture, which will talk about where we get the base for the verbs and what the rules are for conjugating all of these tenses. And we will also look at the endings and the translations.